Hey everyone, welcome back to Home with the Daniels, where I show you all things DIY. Today's video is going to be an exciting one because we're diving into the details of how I built my own garage cabinets. I've been working on transforming my garage into an organized space, and these cabinets are a game changer. If you're into DIY projects and looking to add storage to your garage, then you're in the right place. Before we jump in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming projects. Now let's get started. As always, all the details, links, and additional resources are available on the blog post linked in the description below. I've also put together a detailed step-by-step PDF guide, color-coded with all the steps, material list, and cut list. If you want an even more in-depth guide to follow along, you can purchase it on the blog. Just check out the link in the description below. Happy building! I started by deciding where I wanted my cabinets to be, then planning out the dimensions. I used painter's tape to trace a cabinet on the wall. This is helpful to do so you can visualize to see how it would fit in the space. Also, don't forget to look for the studs on your wall. The purple tape that you see next to the blue, those were all the studs that I found are marked. You want your cabinet to be anchored to as many studs as possible. The cabinet's dimensions are 86 inches tall, 149 inches wide, and 19 inches deep. You'll need materials like treated wood, plywood, screws, and more in order to build this. Check out the blog post for the details. Next up, building the rolling cart. I decided to build a rolling cart first so that I could then construct a cabinet around it. This approach was more convenient for me, eliminating the struggle of trying to build a rolling cart to fit into the cabinet. After cutting all the pieces, I went ahead and put them on the floor to make sure that everything fit. And in the video, you will see that I used 1/2 inch plywood to make the frame of the rolling cart. However, I ended up rebuilding this about a year later, using 3/4 inch of plywood for the frame and 1/2 inch for the shelves in order to make it sturdier. All of those details are on the PDF available on the blog, and like I mentioned before, it's linked below. My sister was visiting at the time, so I dragged her into my DIY adventures and she ended up helping me build this. Before putting the frame together, I used a 1/4 and 1/2 inch spade drill bit in order to make the holes for the dowels. I will explain a little bit more about that in a bit. I measured where I wanted the holes to go and stacked both pieces on top of each other and clamped them to make sure they were perfectly aligned before drilling. This makes things easier to ensure the holes were aligned for the dowels. Alright, so I wanted to show you all what I did really quick and what I'm in the process of doing. So this is the plan for the spray paint rolling shelf. So these that you see here, they're in the red, those are the dowels, which is going to hold the spray paint from falling out in the front. So this is this right here. So this is going to be, this is 7/16 in diameter, and so that's going to go right here in these holes that you see here. So we're going to cut it, and they're going to put the other piece going to be on the other side. And the middle one, actually they're 1/4 inch wide. I was going to do the same width, but it made the space kind of small, so I decided to go with this size instead. This is like 1/4 inch. As you can see, this fits perfectly because I use a 1/4 inch drill bit, but this, for these, I actually use 1/2 inch, so they're actually a little bit bigger because I didn't have 7/16, which I purchased after I already made these holes. But what I'll do is that I will put probably a little bit of wood filler and then some glue to hold it, and I'll clamp them until they dry, so it should be okay. Let me show you all of the bits that I use to make these holes. So this is actually just brought this kit. I had a couple of them. I had 1/2 inch and 1 inch and I think 2 inches. So this is why I used the 1/2 inch that I already had for here, but I didn't have a 1/4 inch, so I brought this kit right here. This is a 1/4 inch one. I brought this kit right here that goes right here. So this has a lot more. There are quite a few of them, but the reason why I specifically went with this one because it has like a storage case, as you can see, so I can put them in and store them in the drawer. All the others were cheaper, but it didn't come with this, and it kind of would just, I didn't want anything having like laying around all over the place, so this is why I went with this one. I used it for the first time today, so I will tell you all how much I liked them after using it for a little while. But what I did notice is that it was a little bit rougher on the wood. I don't know if you can see from here, there's kind of like
pieces of wood, whereas these look more like a cleaner cut. This does not. I don't know if because this was a lot smaller, but it was a lot smaller. I know that was the reason, because these are 1/2 inch and this was a very clean cut. It was a different brand that I used. I actually used Ryobi. Yes, let me grab it to show you all really quick. So I actually use my Ryobi ones from this kit, but Ryobi does not make a 1/4 inch one or a 7/16 inch one, so which is why I ended up brought another kit. I wish they did, but they don't, or maybe they do. I just couldn't find it at Home Depot. So this is what I use to do the bigger holes, and this did a really good job at doing a really clean cut. So after I use this a little bit more, I will let y'all know if I like this one or not. These are my shelves for the rolling cart. So I have the shelves and the top and bottom part. They're all the same length. So I'm actually about to make pocket holes in these to put the shelf together. So I'm going to use the Craig. I think this is a Craig Pro 7 something. I'll look at it and see. I researched a lot, and this was the one that not that it had the best reviews, others are pretty good, but this had more features. Considering we're going to be using this a lot, I wanted to go into a lot of features. But if you're not going to be doing pocket holes, you're only doing once in a while, you can get like the cheap one. I think it's like $20 or $30. This one was $120, I want to say, but it came with like other things. So I'm about to do some pocket holes, and then after that, we're going to put them together, the shelf.
This step is not really necessary, but I wanted all my pocket holes to look uniform, so I just measured the same length on each shelf just so my pocket holes could be uniform on each piece. And if you've never seen a pocket hole jig before, you wanted to know what it looks like, this is a close-up of it. Now that all the pieces are cut, it's time to assemble the frame using pocket hole screws and wood glue. The gray and orange devices you see in the corners are 90-degree clamps. It makes it so much easier to assemble things that are at a 90-degree angle. After using these 90-degree clamps, I found others that I prefer, which I linked on the blog.
Yeah, she got me reaching still.
Next, add the shelves, also using wood glue and pocket hole screws.
Looks could kill. I don't wonder why I'm breathing heavy like the weight of it's on my chest. On my chest. Cause it ain't no lie. I need it more than any metaphor could express. Could express. Could express. If looks can't kill, maybe I'll die tomorrow. But I'll be reaching still. Cause it's a feeling I can't let go. If looks can't kill,
Now time to add the casters. Be sure to use rigid casters that don't swivel. At first I added these casters that you see there which swivel, and then I realized that when you're taking this rolling cart out of the cabinet, it just kind of swivels all over the place, it does not go straight. So you want to use rigid casters, which I ended up adding after. That extra piece of 1/2 inch plywood that you see me adding there, it's because I didn't account for the height of the casters when I was building the cabinet, so it ended up being a little bit too long. Then the front was scraping on the floor, so I ended up adding this. But if you purchase a guide that I made, I account for all that to give you the correct measurement so that this does not happen to you. But if you're making your own and deciding on your own measurements, just be sure to account for that. After cutting the dowels, insert them through the holes, adding wood glue in the end to secure them in place. Time to build the cabinet base. I forgot to record while I was building the bottom of the base, but you can see it next to me in this clip. I also made the mistake of not using pressure treated wood, but I would recommend that you use that since it's going to be on the concrete. The audio was pretty horrible on this clip, so I'm going to go ahead and do a voiceover. As you can see, I'm not using a table saw because I didn't have one at the time. So I cut the plywood using my circular saw and this rib cut guide, which is that blue device that you see me holding there. And I have the plywood sitting on top of a 2-inch insulation foam in order for me to cut it on the floor. Once the 3-inch plywood was cut, I went ahead and put that on top of the base and I secured it using my brad nailer. Next, let's build the back frame of the cabinet using 2x4s. We needed to cut off a little bit of the baseboard for it to fit perfectly, so I used my multi-tool to do that. Now time to cut all the 2x4 pieces for the back frame of the cabinet. For the very top, I actually ended up using the full 12-foot 2x4 piece of wood because of the length that I wanted the cabinet to be. I anchored that top 2x4 to the wall using 3-inch screws and hitting as many studs as possible. Also, don't forget to use a leveler to make sure that it's straight on the wall. You might have to modify the length of the vertical 2x4 for the back frame depending on whether or not your garage has a concrete curb. Because we have a concrete curb, you can see that the vertical 2x4 is sitting right on top of it instead of directly on the floor. This piece was also anchored to the wall using 3-inch screws, and as you can see from the tape, the purple tape at the very top, we have a stud right there, so we're able to anchor it directly on the stud. Next up, building the front frame of the cabinet. The easiest way to build this is directly on the floor. Most garage floors will have a slope to keep the water out. That is something to consider when building this garage cabinet, depending on where you decide to build it in the garage. Luckily, we did not have a huge slope, so I adjusted the front vertical 2x4 to the right and made them slightly longer to accommodate. Our slope made the right side less than 1 inch taller compared to the left side, so it was not really noticeable. Another way to fix this is by adding shims at the base of the cabinet to make the base leveled. Assemble the front frame on the floor by making pocket hole using your pocket hole jig and securing it using 2.5-inch pocket hole screws. Attach the front frame to the rest of the cabinet using pocket hole screws to attach it to the base and at the top. Now time to add the middle compartments. For the middle compartments of the cabinet separating each sections, I used 3/4-inch plywood. And since I did not have a table saw at the time, I used a circular saw and the Craig rib cut guide in order to cut the plywood. Using a pocket hole jig, make pocket holes on the front, back, and bottom part of the 3/4-inch plywood that you just cut. I then attached the middle compartments to the front, back, and base using pocket hole screws.
Hey guys, so today is day 70, 50 since we started this. I want to give you all an update really quick of what we've done. So as you can see, we have the base, we have the frame, and then we recently added all the sides and the top. So now what we're going to do next is actually need to do the outer side, both this side and the other side. We're going to work on doing some shelves, and over here I'm actually going to be doing a pull-out pegboard, which we're going to work on that today as well. I also forgot to mention that we're actually going to be working on the doors today, so I just want to give you a little bit more details of what I used before. So these are all 2x4s that we use. Over here, and for the frame, and the top right here. This is also a 2x4 that we use. This piece in the middle, these are 3/4-inch plywood. They're pine plywood, I think. I would go ahead and link them. And what else is the end of back? You can see this right here. This piece back here, where this part is attached to, this is a 1x2. So we use pocket holes to attach it to here and the front part. And I'm actually also going to use 1x2s for the shelves back here, and to hold the shelves over here as well. So that's going to be what we use. We use mostly 2x4s and 3/4 plywood. And for the doors, I'm going to use 1/2 inch plywood because I think the 3/4 is too thick. And yeah, that's pretty much what we're going to do.
Now time to add the shelves to the cabinet.
We have almost all the shelves cut out. So this is what we had to do over here. We had to kind of cut out on each side for all the shelves to accommodate for this back part right here. And as you can see, we use a 1x2, so it's not even all in. So we had to keep going back and forth to cut everything to make sure everything fits perfectly. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put a 1x2 on this side, and then a longer piece on the back right here, and this is where the shelf is going to sit. I'm going to make sure that I put it in studs. These are like studs over here, so I got to make sure I put them in the studs so they will stay and support the shelf.
Edge bending your shelves is optional, but it's an effective technique to give your shelf a polished look. I personally chose to use it because it transformed the rough, exposed edges of the plywood into a finished look and looks so much better. If you've never heard of edge bending before and have no idea what it is, because I didn't until I built this garage cabinet, it's a thin strip typically made of materials like wood veneer with a heat activated glue, which helps your rough wood edges look finished. It's super easy to apply. All you need is an iron and an edge bending trimming tool. If you would like me to make a more detailed video about how to apply edge bending, just let me know in the comments. And if you're planning on adding a protective clear coat to your shelves, now's the time to do that before you finish installing them. Now time for the doors. As I mentioned earlier, I decided to use a 1/2 inch plywood.
So today we're going to work on the doors. Some of the doors have already been cut and I already added the edge banding to it. So now I'm actually going to prime it, and then hopefully tomorrow we can paint it. If you can see, but this door does not have the edge bending, so you can see like the edges of the plywood, but this one does, and that's the difference.
You should always take the extra step and use a primer before painting wood, because it creates a smooth surface for the paint to adhere, and it also helps seal the wood to prevent stains and knots from bleeding through the paint. I forgot to record footage on how I built this pull-out pegboard for my tools, but I have all the details on my blog. Now time to start painting these cabinets.
Hey guys, so today is another day in the garage. What we're going to do is we're actually going to start painting the frame of the garage. Before we do that, I'm going to cut this 5mm plywood. We're going to cut it and we're going to put it over here, like all across the front frame. The reason why we're doing that is because it would be way too much work, like filling in all the spots. So that's how we're going to do that. And as you can see at the bottom, we have the 2x4 and the plywood. There's no way to hide that except by putting like a front frame. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to cut this and paint and then put it on.
I went ahead and added the front frame using nails and my nail gun, and then I went ahead and filled up all the seams with wood filler.
After filling all the holes, I'm just going to use my sand block, or I think it's called sanding sponge, to kind of sand everything down. You can use sanding paper, but I really love these sponges. They're just a lot easier to hold. I actually got them on Amazon, so I will link them all for you. So kind of just sanding it down to smooth everything out.
After sanding it all down, I went ahead and primed it. It's important that you don't skip this step before painting, because priming helps create a smooth surface for the paint to adhere to. While the primer was drying on the cabinet, we went ahead and painted the doors. To paint the cabinet, I went ahead and used a small roller, and the paint that I use is Benjamin Moore in the color Onyx. Now that everything is dry, it's time to install the doors. We added the hinges to each door. The exact one that I purchased is linked in the blog post. We use our laser to make sure the doors are being installed straight, but if you don't have a laser, you can just use a leveler tool. Dancing in your halo. I forgot to record a clip of how I attached the door to the rolling cart. I just used liquid nails to glue it to the cart as well as screws from the inside. The last thing left to do is adding the cabinet handles. I actually DIY'd these myself, as you can see here, and I do have a more detailed blog post as well as a YouTube video showing exactly how I did it and all the materials I used. I will link that below. I used my laser level to make sure everything is straight, but you could just use a regular leveler tool. And that's it, it's all done. Now we have a functional cabinet in our garage where we can easily store everything and keep everything organized. This took us about 2 months to build. That's because we were doing this between working full time and we got sick around that time, and just also, you know, life sometimes is lifing. 2 years later, we still love it. It's holding up perfectly fine. I would do nothing different.